I'm always grateful for the opportunity to come and have the Mass with you and with the other high schools. I'm very grateful to Mrs. Ott, to Mr. Kerrigan, Dr. Finn, for arranging this opportunity from time to time, and I'm grateful as well all of the faculty, the staff, the administration. I have to say, in a very real way, I'm very grateful to you that I have this opportunity to be here with you in this context, not just of prayer, but of the deepest prayer, the Mass that we have. And part of the reason is that this is good for me. For me, simply to be with you, to see young people in young faith. We're coming off a little bit of a high this past weekend. I think some of you were there for the youth summit that we had. It was infectious. I hope for any of you who weren't able to come, think about it next year, because it was such a positive, reflective, joyful, laughing, serious moment for young people to share their faith. But for me to be here with you is kind of, it helps me to continue that. It helps me to be reminded of so many of the needs of young people when we're talking about faith. But I hope this is good for you as well. Because I come as the bishop, not by any merit, but by having been appointed. I am, in a certain sense, appointed by the Church to be a witness. To be a witness to what Jesus said and did, and to keep saying, and to keep talking about it. But one of the things that I need are fellow witnesses. And I need fellow witnesses who, honest to goodness, will stand with me and therefore with Jesus and with the Church, who are of every age group, who are of every background, who are in so many different ways brought together by Jesus Christ, by His faith. That means, as a witness, I need you. And as disciples, you need to stand with your bishop. Because of somehow, some way, Christ has put that guy here. And when I'm gone, there'll be another. And somehow, it is a part of faith. Something that we need to incorporate as a lived part of faith. So I'm really delighted to be here. And I'm really delighted to think with you too a little bit about what we heard in that first reading. We heard about St. Paul writing to the Romans, and I hope at some point you've got the opportunity to study that particular letter in your theology classes, because it's one of the deepest, meatiest letters that Paul wrote. He hadn't even been to Rome, hadn't even met this community yet, and he wrote this letter to try and help them already before he got there answer some of the deepest questions that I find we not only struggle with through life, but in a particular way, young people struggle with. And struggle with in a way that is a part of that natural growing of faith, asking the questions and asking the right questions. Paul talks at the beginning, I consider the sufferings of this present time as nothing compared with the glory to be revealed. But behind that, he's already addressing the question that for so many of us is there. Why are there sufferings? I didn't ask to come into this world, and then I come into this world, and yeah, there's a lot of joy, but I keep running into suffering. And if there's a God who loves, why then does He allow this suffering? And we know about the suffering in a lot of ways, because some of that's really external. It's everything from having a toothache to having a tough time getting through algebra to other sufferings that we often just keep in our heart, and we wonder why. Maybe it's the sufferings at home. Sometimes our family life isn't what we sense it ought to be. Sometimes mom and dad are arguing or maybe even broken up. Sometimes it's the suffering of just feeling like I'm not as good as everyone else. How come everyone else has so many friends on? Is that a wall that you call it on Facebook? I don't have very many. People don't like me. You go through all of those kinds of sufferings and those doubts and those agitations. And a lot of times we try and put on a good face. But we're asking ourselves, why is there suffering? Why doesn't God answer it when I ask Him now? And Paul goes on, something that's really important for a growing faith, a deepening faith. You're not the first communion class anymore. You are the young adults. And so it's important to struggle with some of these questions. But why, for example, do we sense in ourselves and in others a certain brokenness? There's just something that forever, for how much we can get along and have a good time, there's always this hint of the broken. Somebody who's just a little bit arrogant, or maybe it's me. Why is it that I'm tempted to sin? Why is it I'm tempted not to tell the truth? Why is it I'm tempted? Everything from cutting to alcohol or drugs or chastity. I may not do it, but where's that temptation coming from? And Paul says, there's a brokenness here that we have to understand as a part of the world. And Paul even says one of the most interesting things, that it's not just us, but creation itself has a brokenness. And don't we sense that too? Do you ever think about that? Why is it that so many of the animals turn when they see us and they run? Birds fly away. Fish take off. I can't even catch them. Hunting, you might not find them. They'll stay with each other, but not with us. There's something about the harmony of the world that is broken. And if we don't accept that and understand that, we're not going to understand ourselves, we're not going to understand God, we're not going to understand the world the right way. And what Paul is getting at is, God made this world good, but something happened. We can't even imagine what the world was like before that first sin. But God made the world in all kinds of harmony. Harmony with Him, first and foremost, and then among ourselves, and then all of creation. And then that sin happened. It's described descriptively in Genesis. We know that, the story of going to the garden and eating the apple. What it's describing is disobedience. Because God made the world good, but He left a chink in the armor. And the chink in the armor was this: love. God loved us and wants our love back. But this is the thing, isn't it? For adult faith, love can't be forced. It has to be free. That was the chink in the armor. God made everything good, but we were free not to choose it or accept it. And so when that sin came, something happened that changed the world. And you and I now bear, as a part of everything we are, including the goodness, we bear a brokenness within ourselves. A brokenness that we constantly have to work to overcome. The brokenness that we see in the world. The brokenness that sometimes leads to that suffering that is such a mystery. why does God allow it? Somehow, out of that suffering, out of that remnant of sin, God does bring good. God does strengthen us. God does teach us to come beyond ourselves. And you and I know that as well, don't we? Think about your friendship with your best friend. Friendship grows when you have to sacrifice for each other, when it gets tough, when you have to stand up and be counted. That's part of what suffering does. But we need to pray. This is why in a place like this, in a school like this, when we teach you about your identity as friends of Jesus Christ, as followers of Jesus Christ, as disciples of Jesus Christ, as Catholics, we're teaching you to pray and giving you the practice of praying. We're teaching you about the Mass. Are you getting to Mass every Sunday? I know sometimes that's hard, but especially those of you who got the keys already, you can borrow the car. You might borrow the car for this, that, and the other. Why don't you borrow the car for Mass? How are you doing about confession? How are you doing about the poor? How are you doing about standing with the unborn? Father Finn told me there's a large group that's already planning to go to Washington this year for the march. Good for you. But all of these are ways that we work to overcome the brokenness. All of these are ways that adult faith works to draw closer to Jesus Christ. Paul finishes this letter not on a negative note, this passage. In hope, we were saved. If we hope for what we do not see, we wait with endurance. He told us right at the beginning, the sufferings of this present time, whatever it is you're going through, whether it's visible, whether it's held in the depths of your heart, the sufferings of the present time are as nothing compared with the glory to be revealed within us. Each one of you bears that seed of glory. But one of the things that we're desperately trying to do is to help you to grow that seed by your prayer, by your conduct, by your love for Jesus Christ and your faith.